Ted Bundy. The man behind the mask. Ted Bundy wasn't just a killer, he was a predator who weaponized charm. Born in 1946, Bundy grew up learning how to imitate emotions he didn't truly feel. Those who knew him described him as charismatic, confident, even likable. But beneath that facade was something cold and calculated. A man who saw people not as human beings, but as objects to be manipulated. In the early 1970s, Bundy began targeting young women who fit a very specific profile. Long hair parted in the middle, soft features, college age. He stalked campuses, libraries, parking lots, anywhere he could observe and select a victim. Bundy crafted one of the cruelest hunting methods ever seen. He would fake an injury, a broken arm, a cast, crutches, and ask women for help loading books or carrying something to his car. His victims believed they were helping a harmless, wounded man. Instead, as they reached the vehicle, Bundy struck them with a crowbar and forced them inside. Inside the woods or isolated areas, Bundy committed horrific acts: kidnapping, assault, murder, and sometimes, even after the victim's death, he returned to the scene to further mutilate their bodies. He performed necrophilic acts, washed their hair, applied makeup, and kept their remains for days, unable to let go of the power he held. Bundy outsmarted police again and again. Arrested in 1975, he escaped jail twice. The second time, he simply starved himself until he could slip through a hole in the ceiling, disappearing into the night. His final rampage in Florida in 1978 was pure chaos. He broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University, beating and strangling multiple women within minutes. 2 died, 2 survived with brutal injuries. Days later, he murdered 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. Bundy was finally captured and sentenced to death. Even in his final interviews, he refused to take responsibility, smiling, shifting blame, and manipulating until his last breath. Jeffrey Dahmer. The monster in the apartment. Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes weren't just murders. They were acts of extreme depravity that shocked even veteran investigators. Dahmer began killing at 18, but it was during 1978 to 1991 that his crimes spiraled into something almost unimaginable. Living in apartment 213 in Milwaukee, he invited young men and teenagers, often vulnerable, poor, or from marginalized communities, into his home with offers of money, modeling photos, or drinks. Inside, Dahmer drugged them until they were unconscious. Then came the horrors: strangulation, dismemberment, necrophilia, and in some cases, cannibalism. Dahmer kept trophies: skulls, hearts, preserved organs, photographs of mutilated bodies. Investigators later found a blue barrel filled with dissolved human remains. His cruelty was often enabled by terrifying coincidences. In one case, a 14-year-old boy escaped Dahmer's apartment, naked, bleeding, and disoriented. Neighbors called the police, but Dahmer convinced officers it was a lover's quarrel. They handed the boy back to Dahmer, who killed him minutes later. This single moment could have ended the nightmare. Dahmer was finally exposed in 1991 when Tracy Edwards escaped in handcuffs and flagged down a police car. Officers entered Dahmer's apartment and found a gallery of horror: Polaroids, bone fragments, and a human head in the refrigerator. Dahmer received multiple life sentences. In 1994, another inmate beat him to death in prison. A violent end to a man whose crimes remain among the most disturbing in modern history. John Wayne Gacy. The killer under the house. John Wayne Gacy hid his evil beneath clown makeup and a friendly smile. Known as Pogo the Clown, he entertained at children's parties and raised money for charity, all while running a deadly operation in the quiet suburbs of Chicago. Between 1972 and 1978, Gacy lured teenage boys and young men with job offers, money, or the promise of a better life. Many were runaways or kids from troubled homes. Easy to manipulate, easy to make disappear. Gacy performed a magic trick that only had one outcome. He would handcuff the victims and then say, "The trick is, you have to get out of the cuffs." When they asked how, he replied, "You can't. That's the trick." What followed was torture, assault, and strangulation. After killing them, Gacy buried the bodies in the crawl space of his house. Over time, the smell became so strong that neighbors complained. Gacy blamed it on a flooded sewer. When police finally searched his property in 1978, they uncovered a mass grave: 29 bodies beneath his home, others dumped into rivers. Gacy showed no remorse. Even during interviews, he laughed, joked, and blamed his victims. He was executed in 1994, but the trauma he inflicted still echoes through the families he destroyed. Ed Gein, the butcher of Plainfield. Ed Gein wasn't like other killers. His crimes were rooted in deep psychological trauma and obsession. Growing up on a remote farm in Wisconsin, Gein's mother was a strict, abusive woman who taught him that women were sinful and evil. She isolated him from the world, controlling everything he thought, felt, or believed. When she died, Gein became completely alone, trapped with his fantasies. He began digging up freshly buried bodies from local cemeteries. From the corpses, he created horrifying objects. Masks made of human skin, bowls made from skulls, chairs upholstered with flesh, a skin suit he wore to become his dead mother, but grave robbing didn't satisfy him forever. In 1954 and 1957, he murdered 2 women, Mary Hogan and Bernice Wardens. When police entered Gein's farmhouse, they stepped into a nightmare. Body parts hanging like tools, jars filled with organs, and furniture crafted from human remains. Gein was declared mentally insane and spent the rest of his life in psychiatric institutions. His crimes inspired horror icons like Norman Bates, Leatherface, and Buffalo Bill, his legacy shaping the entire genre of psychological horror. Aileen Wuornos, the highway hunter. Aileen Wuornos lived a life filled with pain long before she ever killed anyone. Abandoned, abused, and homeless by 15, she survived by hitchhiking and prostitution across Florida's highways. Between 1989 and 1990, she shot and killed 7 men. Wuornos claimed each killing was an act of self-defense, that the men tried to rape or assault her. Some evidence supported her claims of violent encounters, but not all. What made her story so complex was the mix of trauma, survival, rage, and mistrust. She was a woman who had been hurt her entire life and believed the world was out to harm her again. Her arrest in 1991 came after police traced items pawned from her victims. Wuornos eventually confessed, saying she killed them, robbed them, and didn't feel bad about it. Her emotional breakdowns during interviews showed a mind overwhelmed by years of suffering. She was executed in 2002, one of the few female serial killers in American history. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. Richard Ramirez was a walking nightmare. Thin, wild-eyed, addicted to drugs, and obsessed with Satanism, he prowled the streets of California between 1984 and 1985, breaking into homes at night. Ramirez's attacks were brutally unpredictable. He used whatever weapon he could find: hammers, knives, cords, guns, anything. He didn't have a single victim type. He attacked men, women, the elderly, and even children. This randomness spread terror across Los Angeles. Ramirez left satanic symbols, such as pentagrams, at crime scenes and sometimes forced his victims to praise Satan. His crimes were so chaotic that detectives struggled to link them, until survivors helped identify him. In August 1985, a group of citizens recognized Ramirez from a police sketch. They chased him through the streets, subdued him, and held him until officers arrived. Ramirez was convicted of 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, 14 burglaries. He showed no remorse, grinning in court and flashing pentagrams on his hand. Ramirez spent the rest of his life on death row until dying of cancer in 2013.